as I've talked about before, our fetal medical consultant, Gareth Waring, who was fantastic, who unfortunately isn't still at the RVI in Newcastle. He's moved away, but he has definitely trained other people in that fetal medicine unit that are following in his footsteps. I've had that feedback. But very early on, we had a discussion around how would Lucy be born? What would you like to do? And he let me lead it, and I led it using the information that I'd got from the support group. And I said, and it's funny because me being me, had done a lot of research, spoken to quite a few different people, and Down Syndrome UK, Positive About Down Syndrome, had provided this document that was written by a hospital down south that was like a kind of, because there's a pathway in law now. Once you're born, if you have Down syndrome, there's a medical pathway that needs to be followed, and it basically makes sure that every paediatrician treats every child the same way, and they all get the same tests and all the rest of it. But pregnancy is still a bit up in the air. There's nothing in law that says if you are pregnant with a child with Down syndrome, you must have X, Y, and Z tests. You must be seen this many times. It's all a bit, well, we've got the experience of doing it this way and that seems to work. And I was worried that if I didn't go in with this document that suggested that children with Down syndrome should ideally be born slightly early before the placenta has a chance to start failing, and if a child with Down syndrome has a prenatal heart diagnosis like we did, that a natural birth can be a bit trickier.
Okay,
so I had all that information. I went into the meeting and put it down on the desk in front of him and said, I want it done this way, and explain what the document said. And I said, but I've brought the document so you can go away and read it in case you don't agree with me. And he said, funny that, Laura. My experience birthing children with Down syndrome is they should come out around 37 weeks, and that's what you've just told me, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay.
And I went, oh, wow. No arguments. Cool. No, you must read this document. No fights. Nothing like I expected it to be, because I was hearing people having issues around the country.
Right.
So I was going in armed because I didn't want to have this fight. No. I was more you're doing what I say. We're not having a discussion about it. But in actual fact, I didn't even need to do that.
Because one of the things you just mentioned there about placenta failure. So what does that look like? Does that mean it fails and then the pregnancy, like they try to come the normal...
yes, So
your waters break and you're on.
Yeah, as the placenta starts to fail, then generally, from what I understand,
so
I'm no medical expert,
but they fail earlier.
They can fail earlier
because they're triggered to fail like normal at 9 months.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know what. Again, I've not seen any research that backs this up, but it's more of a kind of a word of mouth thing that this seems to happen. And like I say, he had that experience himself, dealing with people that had prenatal diagnosis. His recommendation was either to be induced or a section. And he said, when I told him what I wanted to do, that I wanted to have a section, and it wasn't because I'm too posh to push, mister. It's because Lucy had this prenatal heart diagnosis where I felt that because she had a complete AVSD, which is a very major heart defect, it felt like it was the fairest thing to do rather than push her through pushing.
Because she'll have that trauma, and you don't want to put the child through trauma.
I didn't want to put her under any undue stress trying to come out naturally, when I'd already been told, well, you're too overweight and you're too old to have a water birth, and now you've got all these complications with this child having Down syndrome. You're not having the type of birth you wanted in the first place anyway. I'd already been told that before I'd even had any tests, that I wasn't eligible for a water birth. Which was nice. But, these things, they have and again, I've learned a lot. At the time, I was very offended. But now I understand why, because I would be too high risk in that situation that something could go wrong. And again, they weren't forcing me. They were just really pushing me against having a water birth. And then once I knew that was kind of out of the question, it was like, well, how am I going to get this baby out of me? And it just made sense, really, for me personally. But it is still a very personal thing. And Dr. Gareth Waring did say, you can be induced at 37 weeks. You don't have to have a section, Laura. it's entirely up to you. And I chose to have a section. It was in my, I was able to make that decision, which was nice. And that's what I decided to do. Well, that's what John and I decided to do, to be fair. We did discuss it and we both agreed it was the safest and, simplest way to do it without coming across any complications and needing an emergency section.
So, a data set? And what would it look like? Did they tell you this is what your delivery is going to look like? Because is it a delivery because of Lucy's complications and Lucy's diagnoses in general? Is that a different delivery procedure to what your average child would experience?